I feel like every day I look at the news and it's just a complete crap show, to put it lightly. And right now, we've got a lot of discussion back and forth about Zelensky, his meeting with Trump, what that means, how, basically NATO and Europe is standing behind Zelensky and saying, look, we're going to back you. Let's go to war. Let's go to World War III. It just seems like there's a group of people on this earth that want nothing more than complete chaos. And they're looking for every single way possible to make that happen. But simultaneously, you have this massive shift happening in the global financial system. You have this gold flowing into America like we've never seen before. We have talking about the potential default of the LBMA, the London Bullion Market Association, which is really what fixes and sets the price of gold through the manipulation of the paper market. We have so many big chess pieces all moving at once. And the question I have is, how does it fit together? How does what's happening with the gold market tie into Zelensky and Putin and Trump and Elon Musk and Doge? And my guest today, my good friend Todd Callender, what I enjoy about him is that he's able to look at all these different events, but then see the common thread and help us to make sense of what's happening around us and potentially even understand what's coming next. And so in today's interview with Todd, we're going to be diving into everything from gold and global gold-backed currencies to Zelensky and money laundering and Putin and World War III and Russia and so much more. So please enjoy the interview. Mr. Todd Callender, it's always such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. And I love speaking with you. So thank you for being here today.
I mean, it's always my pleasure, Seth. And I'm always reminded for people that watch that our discussions seem to be upbeat. I think that's a function of you giving me some optimism. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, it goes both ways. It goes both ways. And yeah, I mean, I'd say collectively our interviews have reached millions of people, which is kind of cool to
Yeah,
think about, which is it's quite an accomplishment. So
it
um
is. And we're here, Seth. That's the point, right? We survived the first attack, which was daunting. And they don't stop, but we're still here. And that's in no small part to you, brother, you and the other people out there, the influencers getting this out. And of course to the audience, because they're having these conversations around the dinner table, and collectively, is that like a spider web goes out, we were able to open some minds, and that was really a wonderful feeling, including, by the way, our star witness, Colonel Chambers, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Chambers, and Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Long, being recognized by the president for saving hundreds of thousands of lives and careers in the military. That is by virtue of these things that you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one of the reasons why I always enjoy speaking with you is because you're not just a siloed, one thing really, really well. You've got a pulse on so many things, but you've got the very broad-minded perspective and be able to bring it all together. And so there's a lot
Good.
that we're getting into today, but I want to first start with Ukraine, Zelensky, the
Yeah.
war, because it's something that
Yeah.
I'm seeing. It's interesting because a lot of topics I cover don't seem to make it to the mainstream, or if they do, that you'll see a little smattering of it. But when I look at my personal Facebook page, I can see a lot of my friends I went to school with, they're talking about Zelensky, and there's you have the pro Ukraine, I stand with Ukraine. You have the people that are like, oh,
Yes.
Ukraine's a criminal hotbed. But I think that a lot
Yes.
of people though, they see it through still only a small perspective. And
They
I
do.
had Martin Armstrong on recently. I'm not sure if you got a chance to listen to that one, but I think you'd be very fascinated with it because
I'm generally
you
fascinated
know,
by him.
oh,
Yes.
he's just amazing. And we are talking about this gold flow, all this gold
Yes.
coming in, and the idea of like, okay, is there going to be a revaluation? And he said, look, he goes, it's because war is coming to Europe, right? And if
Yeah.
there's one
They
guy that
want it.
knows how the flow of currency indicates war, it's him. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of his big thing is being able to predict the rise and fall of nations and wars based upon capital flow. And
Sure.
so I think that I'd love to get your perspective on this because I think that
Yeah.
Zelensky is just, to me, he's just the puppet of all puppets. I mean, he's
Sure he
just
is.
an actor they plucked out, they put him in the
Yes.
stage. And it's like no decisions that he makes are being made by him. He is just a
That's
puppet.
correct.
being controlled by a handful of different groups and nations and NATO and whatnot. But I'd like to hear your perspective on the bigger picture of why NATO especially wants so much to pull us into World War III, how it relates to
Sure,
the European nations, how it ties into Ukraine, why Ukraine,
sure.
Trump, Putin, the whole thing. It's such a complicated thing. It's so easy to take one part of it and say, "Oh, well, Putin's a dictator, and this is why this is happening," or vice versa. So, wherever you want to start with that, there's a lot we can talk about here.
Well, let me start with saying the reason why I have a broad perspective is because in my day job we have operations all over the planet, including in Ukraine, where we manufacture, funny enough, this. It basically makes you immune from radiation, amongst other things.
What is that?
And it's called RF Defense. It's a supplement based on a very ancient bacillus that is immune to radiation. And when you take this, it makes you also immune to radiation, amongst other things. It repairs DNA, and we're going through the regulatory process with the FDA. We've already been through the Canadian one, so we're preparing to get this out into the world. But it's a supplement, and our company owns this company. And you may not know this, but every major pharmaceutical company in the world is headquartered in Kiev. And the reason for that is because Ukraine is a territory of Russia, right? For purposes of sovereign recognition, it is viewed as a territory of Russia, no different than Taiwan is viewed as a territory of China. Why is that important? Because they didn't sign the bioweapons treaties. So effectively, you have the Vegas of Europe or of Asia, as the case may be, where anything goes in Ukraine legally. So they are able to do all kinds of genetic modification, manipulation, genetic therapies, anything that could be offsides in the United States of America or even mainland China. That goes just fine in Ukraine and Taiwan. And this is why the bioweapons factories were there, including the two owned by Metabiota. Who owns Metabiota? Hunter Biden, right? And the big guy. So we get a snapshot by being there, having staff on the ground, really smart people, the leader of which has lived and worked in Russia and Ukraine in the banking industry and the biomedical industry. These are really knowledgeable, quality people. So by virtue of us operating in that environment and different places around the world, I get a really good chance to juxtapose what's happening, how, and why. The reality is simply this, that when the governments of this world agreed in 1994 that 7 billion people have to go. So they arrived at this conclusion in Cairo, Egypt, 1994, in the population accords. A series of things were set into motion. How would you go about doing that? You and I have talked about it before. There are many different vectors to this kill box, as we've described it. And in reality, all of them have failed because of what you and I just spoke about. The master plan was to use the shots to kill and or mutate everybody into synbio cloud computing nodes and batteries. We foiled that, we being collectively, right? The people that stood their ground said no, whether that was the military or elsewhere. Guys like you getting word out, hey, these shots are dangerous, caused hesitation, and that plan failed. It failed miserably. Their plan B necessarily is, oh crap, we're now caught. You can't contain the truth. What are we going to do? Well, the mission never changed. They still want to destroy humanity. So now what's the next most reasonable means? And that is clearly a nuclear event. You might recall in prior conversations, we talked about the Ukrainians shelling Chernobyl, right? The sarcophagus leaking nuclear radiation plant. It was a power plant in Ukraine. And they're trying to shell it. Why? To cause a nuclear event, trying to push Vladimir Putin into a nuclear exchange. Any excuse will do, whether it is their continental Europe or anywhere else, they don't care, including Chinese or Mexican cartels or whoever coming across the border into the United States. The owner's credo is Ordo ad Cal, order from chaos. And I had some key indicators that this wasn't going to work, including the fact that there's $4 quadrillion worth of derivatives on the market. And as those would have come due and been called, the global economy necessarily would have had to collapse because every financial institution on the planet has that crap on their balance sheet. There's no way to meet the payments when those are called due. It's like FTX, all the derivatives came due, they couldn't meet their liabilities, bankrupt. That was the plan. The Qataris took over that contagion in the balance sheet of Credit Suisse, and they cleaned it up. and then they sold Credit Suisse or part of it to UBS. Those are systemic banks. Those are global systemic banks. Why would you clean up their balance sheets if your mission was to destroy the world economy? They needed the trigger to destroy everything. And somebody in the background is plucking out the ability for them to do that, subverting that mission. And I think that goes back to the meeting between President Trump, President Putin in Sochi, who my friend and fellow board member, General Paul Vallely, organized that meeting in 2019. Mr. Putin passes the ball to Mr. Trump. He says the ball's in your court. What that meant was, let's not go forward with the owner plan to destroy the world. How about if you and I and Mr. Modi, Mr. Xi, all get along and we compete? We're going to overthrow the system. We're going to take our planet back. And that's precisely what has happened. Mr. Trump said it was his national security policy. I don't want bombs and guns and wars. I want for us to trade. We're going to compete in trade. And what do you see? Precisely that. He says we're going to do tariffs. Some people call them import duties. The place where I live is based on import duties. We don't have an income tax. So the United States can do away with the income tax. He knows how to do it. Our nation was born that way. Everybody is resetting the play. The entire field of play is being reset from a debt model economy into an equity model economy. And that's what people are missing, is the unwinding of the intended bankruptcy of the planet. And it's unwinding right now. And we're watching it, including 250 or more planes of gold coming back to the United States, because the currency will be gold backed. It must be gold backed if we're going to save the global economy. And clearly that's Mr. Trump's intention, because that's what he's doing. So there isn't going to be a nuclear war. There isn't going to be a war in Europe. There's not going to be a war anywhere. They're coming to an end because the old paradigm is done. And it is done by agreement amongst noble world powers who said, no, I'm not going to destroy this world. I'm not going to destroy humanity. That's what you're watching.
So a lot to unpack there. And I've got a lot of questions. So I'll try to be concise with them, because otherwise I'll be throwing 10 things at you at once.
I don't mind.
So, okay, a snapshot of the world right now. The world is ruled by a corrupt banking cabal. It's way more complicated. Okay, yes, there's a transition happening. That banking cabal has primarily ruled the world through usury and through basically through debt, using debt as a weapon, ensnaring countries in debt, through the central banking system. Like, the U.S. government now, what's our debt? $36.5 trillion, right? The interest payment on that alone is well beyond our own defense budget every year.
Yes.
And so, but they've used this system through these fiat currencies primarily, but then also through using the LBMA, right? The London Bullion Market Association.
You bet.
Which is what sets the gold price in many ways. So they've used the paper market through the promissory notes to basically flood the market with gold to suppress the price of gold, which has allowed them to, obviously, like under Nixon, when we came up with the gold standard, it's allowed them to create this massive debt and derivative bubble where they've taken, for every dollar sitting in the bank account, there's $1,000 or $10,000 being traded off of that into the derivatives market, which is this multi-trillion-dollar market of debt.
Quadrillions.
There you go. There you go. And so that system, it's like, okay, everyone looks at, let's say 2008, the housing collapse, which I think was in a lot of ways, I think it was something else that was happening. And they covered it.
It was an accounting rule change.
Yeah, they made it look like that. Yes, and so, but that was like, getting in a fender bender as opposed to a pile up that takes out 1,000 cars on a highway. I mean, the difference between that and what it would look like if there was a global default on the global debt, because that system, like every fiat currency, has a life cycle. It has a beginning, it has an end. Gold doesn't. Gold's been traded as a monetary instrument for over 4,000 years. Right.
Important word.
Right. And so basically this system is collapsing. This global financial system is collapsing. They, as far as I understand, the Europeans, because the European countries, which we have the center, City of London, the banking cabal, gold has surged 46% in less than a year, doubling the gains of the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. But this isn't just another rally. Global reserves are shifting, exposing cracks in the monetary system. Investors are losing confidence in paper gold and demanding physical metal, creating a massive gap between gold owed and gold available. But this isn't about how institutions broke another system. It's about how you can profit from it. Right now, Noble Gold Investments has a limited supply of investment-grade gold bars and coins available. As banks scramble to fulfill their obligations, pushing gold prices higher, you can profit. Smart investors are already moving into physical gold. Noble Gold Investments makes it easy for you to do the same. And right now, when you make a qualified investment, Noble Gold will add a free 10th ounce gold coin to your order. Don't wait until it's too late. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 now and turn their panic into your profit. Again, that's goldwithseth.com or 626-654-1906. You'll find that information in the description for the show as well. Europe doesn't have anything close to the amount of resources that China, Russia, or the United States do, or Ukraine even. And so,
Yes.
as I understand, Europe needed to bring Putin into a war so they could seize the resources of Russia, which I've heard estimates of upwards of $75 trillion in natural resources under the
Possible.
ground of Russia.
Sure.
So they need to create a war as a guise for collapsing the banking system, seize these assets to maintain control. Like that's the corner they're backed into. Is that am I kind of on
Yes, no, there's a lot of truth in that. That's clearly part of the plan, except that it wasn't just Europe. The plan was to destroy the entire global economy in every country, a global reset. And instead, they got their timing all off because Mr. Trump spent 4 years in office and caused those gears and cogs not to match up. So the plan was moving forward, except the United States did, and it caused a huge hiatus where other countries started rethinking things. For example, you had the BRICS nations. For 10 years, they were trying to launch their currency and couldn't do that. Why? It was supposed to be gold back then. It wasn't. Why is it, Seth, that the IMF, the debt slave master, switched their base currency from special drawing rights in 2020 to 2023 monetary gold? They switched to the gold standard. The loan sharks switched to the gold standard. Why? Why would they do that if their mission was to destroy the global economy? And it was effectively a stated mission. And the answer to that is leadership in key countries decided they weren't going with the program. They weren't going to go with Klaus Schwab's plan. And it could not work without it, especially the United States. Why? Because the United States was the paymaster. Right? When you see that the money was cut off from USAID, from State Department resources, from DOD resources, other transactional authority, all came to a grinding halt. I just got back from Switzerland. That's where I was last week. And what do you see? And I'm in the financial world, right? What it is you see is everybody coming to the realization that the debt model economy is coming to an end. And instead, what it will look like is what Gaddafi was trying to build and for which he paid with his life. Where citizens of a country enjoy an equity return. They enjoy dividends on the national assets. And that's how our country actually started. And the debt slavery in 1913, created by the Federal Reserve Act, is being undone. And all this craziness you hear and see are gasping breaths, the last breaths of the owner's paradigm. We're taking the planet back, and they don't know what to do, and they don't have the resources to do anything about it. To think that Europe is going to take on Russia is a joke. There is no NATO without the United States of America. It doesn't exist. They have no means. I think the United Kingdom has 2 days worth of ammunition. They're gonna take on Russia, who's geared up and been at war for 2 years. Good luck with that.
so what's interesting is, and for some reason I've become very fascinated with global finance over the past couple of years. To me, it's not about money; it's about understanding how the entire world works. And if you can
Yeah,
start to
sure.
understand the financial system, it gives you insight into so many other factors you can then make sense of. And so, if you look at what's happened since the U.S. dollar became the global reserve currency, and you look at again, which strengthens the dollar, which also
Yeah.
hurts the United States as an export nation, because now we're
Yes.
exporting debt
Because it's
instead,
expensive.
and it causes us to become
Yeah.
an importing nation. So, which allowed China, Germany, South Korea, a lot of other countries, Taiwan, to really post World War II to really rebuild their economies and grow into much more powerful
Manufacturing.
countries, manufacturing countries.
Yeah.
However, that has to come to an end. But also there's been a lot of manipulation between currency, right? Because why has China been able to become such a powerful exporter? Because they've
They were
artificially
built.
held, they've suppressed the value of their currency. They've manipulated it on the world market so that
You
what
bet.
costs you $10 to make in America costs you $1 to make in China. So if you're a business
That's right.
owner, it's like it's hard to not go that way. If now maybe it's easier because there's much more of a pro America, buy made in America, I'll pay more for American. But 10 years ago there wasn't. And so this situation that's been created globally, where these currencies have become an absolute mess through the derivatives
They
market,
are.
through all the different just corrupt bankster
Planned
cabal
destruction.
manipulation, right?
That's right.
So I've come to the own conclusion that through my research and through interviews, that the only way to correct all of this is basically for the entire world to go back to a gold-based system, because it's
Yeah.
it's it's the great equalizer. It's the one thing that
Yeah.
you
I
do
think
it,
you're
and
right.
then there's no way that you can cheat that system anymore. And so, do you? So you mentioned return to a gold back currency. So is that
Yeah.
what you're seeing? Is that what you're like? All
Yes.
these different these. I'm sorry.
Yes. It's exactly what I'm seeing. Seth, when you see states in the United States starting to stockpile gold and silver, when you see cantons in Switzerland buying their own precious metals, the federal
What's
government,
a
the United
canton?
States, it's effectively a state or a
Oh,
province
okay, okay.
in Switzerland. They just call them cantons. Effectively, they're the tribes turned into states within the Federal Republic of Switzerland. And money printing, the national currency is the Swiss franc. The cantons don't have the right to print francs. The government does. The United States prints dollars, or the Federal Reserve does, but the states don't mint their own coins heretofore. And yet, all of the states, all of the cantons, all of these sub sovereigns to federal republics are now going into the money business themselves, that being holding of their own resources, which means that they've lost faith in their own currency. They've lost faith in their own federal government's ability to control budgets and spending and the printing of money. So it doesn't matter now what it is that the federal governments are going to do, because the states are going back to their own sovereignty vis-a-vis the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And we saw this with COVID. Some states locked down, other states didn't. They were not homogenous. And that distinction is what creates effectively sovereignty. This band of groups says we're not masking and we're going to stick together, and these are our laws. We made them. All things are local. So you're now seeing this happening as a global phenomenon, and it is the reestablishment of sovereignty. And it is beautiful. And it is by this very measure that you just spoke. There is no choice but to return to a gold standard, because everything else is a fiction. You can tie it to gold or you cannot. And if you do not, then you got to tie it to something else. Bitcoin, what does that tie to? Nothing. Computation, a limit of supply. But that by itself gave it a competitive advantage, along with the fact that it's not government issued. So long, Seth, as there is competition between nations and between currencies and between stocks and bonds and other assets, as long as that freedom of choice exists, humanity shall be free. And that's what they were seeking to destroy, all of that. No choice whatsoever. You'll have nothing and you're going to be happy, damn it. Right? That failed. It's over. And so now we see a transformation of the global economy, state by state, county by county, person by person. We are no longer going to be your debt slaves. We're not paying taxes. Mr. Trump says it himself. Abolish the IRS. Have you heard anybody say, no, 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 we need the IRS? Yeah, they're called Democrats. Why? Because it's their criminal enterprise they seek to maintain and control, to follow through their plan that sees them as demagogues, demagogues, I should say, and the rest of us as serfs. That was their plan, and it has failed miserably. So now there is no choice but to do exactly what you said. And the US dollar, I can tell you with absolute certainty, is the strongest of all currencies in the world. because as bad as it is, all the other ones are worse except for the ruble. And the reason for that is because it's tied to gold.
So the article I pulled up when you're talking here, this was just a couple of days ago, uh, says a groundbreaking bill to establish a strategic gold reserve has just become law in Wyoming. So
Yep.
Wyoming, they just passed the Wyoming Gold Act, right? So Senate
Yep.
filed 96, requires the Wyoming treasurer to diversify the state's holdings by acquiring no less than $10 million in basically in specie legal tender as part of this fund. So you can see this, and there's a lot of the other states that are doing it as
Yeah.
well. They're
Utah's done it.
pushing, yep,
Arkansas.
to
Yeah.
go back to. I know Texas has also got a lot happening in this area
Yes.
as well, and so when you're seeing it happening on the state level, so you think that this movement of gold happening, right? We had the CEO of StoneX come out a couple of weeks ago saying that he estimated at least 2,000 metric tons of gold that has been brought back into the United States, which
Easy.
started early December. So it started shortly after
That's right.
Trump won the election. So this must have been something that was planned long in advance. So what you're seeing is that basically before the music stops, everyone's shuffling, looking
Uh-huh.
for a chair, and what you see
Yeah.
happening is the countries that are in the know, the countries that are rejecting and stepping away from this old world order are the countries that
Yes.
have been amassing massive gold reserves, which we've seen. A lot of the BRICS nations, Turkey,
Yeah.
Poland, and on top of the
China.
other, BRICS nations, China, et cetera. Um, Now Canada sold off all their precious metals. Like, it's UK, I think, also got rid of a bunch of their stuff. We know that the Bank of England now has a lot of speculation about how their reserves are at a very, very
That's
low
right.
level. So
That's right.
so you see that a basically a massive restructuring of the global financial system
Absolutely.
is imminent.
It's not only imminent, it's in process. So I really first started looking at this right after Mr. Trump took office the first time. And the reason for that is his very first executive order included a law that I used to enforce. I worked in federal law enforcement in law school. And part of that job was doing civil asset forfeiture extraterritorially, taking assets abroad and bringing it back to the United States. It operates under something called IEPA, International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which Mr. Trump invoked in his very first executive order and several of them thereafter. Anything related to human trafficking gives us the pretext to start seizing assets abroad. And they did, including extraditing the banker for the Vatican, right? And they started seizing those assets, which included, as I understand it, 250 airplanes full of gold. That was the first time around, right? Here he is back again. And what did we see immediately after that? The IMF said, okay, debtor nations, you now have to repay us. Those interest components, the ones that you collect tax for and pay us interest on, that 25% of that has to come back in physical gold. So now when you have the loan shark saying, I don't want your crappy US dollars, I don't want your crappy euros or Canadian dollars, I want gold. What other choice do those nations have but to repay it in gold, acquire the gold, repay it, or produce their own gold? The answer is they didn't have any because those loans were all collateralized with national assets, including you and me, and our earnings and our taxable future, but also national assets that were largely confiscated through UNESCO and other operations like that. And that has all come to a grinding halt. The OECD is the one world government. It has been in power since 2016, January 1, took over 183 nations. And now what am I seeing? USAID, no more funding there. OECD, one world government, done. The paymaster has stopped, and everything else has stopped. They were all using our backs, our slave labor, to fund our own global imprisonment and eventually death. And Mr. Trump stopped it in a day. In a day. So what we're watching is all of this unfolding, and these countries are now struggling to figure out what are they going to do. Are they going to be able to go through with the plan, or are they going to follow Mr. Trump's lead, Mr. Modi, Mr. Xi, Mr. Putin, who have agreed to trade instead of kill each other? And so they don't have a choice. Europe turned off their coal plants. Europe stopped their steel making and a lot of manufacturing. In furtherance of these lofty goals of the World Economic Forum, Sustainable Development, DEI, SDG goals, what a bunch of nonsense. it doesn't mesh with market economics. And Mr. Trump is forcing market economics onto the global stage, and they cannot cope. They have to reconfigure their economies to what Mr. Gaddafi was effectively doing and paid for his life for doing. Globally, that's what's happening. And it will take a little time to ferret out, but there is no going back, Seth. This is going to happen.
So you think, and this actually goes in line with a lot of the interviews and the research that I've done, that basically there's a massive repatriation of gold happening right now. And it's
Sure.
probably been happening for longer than we know.
Yes.
As what you said, you think it started, in a large way under in Trump's first
Yes,
term. And
it did.
so, though on the books they're saying that, okay, the U.S. should have around 8,000 tons of gold, roughly, I think. And though right now they're only valuing it at what, 42.50 or $45 an ounce, which is kind of wild.
Absurd.
So you think that what's happening is that my guess is that the United States has far more gold than that, than what's
And there has to
perceived.
be reset of pricing too. So when you look at, again, the financial markets, last week I had 3 conversations about this. The Israelis said that the true value of gold is $122,000 an ounce. The systemic banks in Europe are saying $22,000 an ounce. The American ones, the big guys, are saying $12,000 an ounce. One way or another, the artificially low price, and just as you said, making paper to drive the price of gold down, there isn't anywhere near enough gold to meet the paper, right, that they issued against it, is going to cause this reset. And there is going to be an enormous change in price and the value of gold. And it's being driven down right now so that countries can buy up as much as they possibly can before the music stops. You've got this exactly right.
Interesting. Because I just did a conversation over the weekend with a guy named Eric Yeung, who's he's a financial guy, understands gold markets really well, and he went into the COMEX and the LBMA, what's happening with the different markets, and what he said what's happening is because a lot of this gold is being brought back through the COMEX, he basically referred to it as a public execution of the LBMA. That what they're doing is that they're publicly exposing
Yes,
they're kind of creating a gold run on the LBMA. And now, even though right now in America, you can still buy gold and silver at a relatively low premium. But
absolutely.
I was listening to an interview last night with Sean at SGT and David Jensen. And David Jensen, I should hopefully be having back on soon. And what David Jensen said all is because just like the housing market in 2008, that the last people to know are the dumb money, as they call it, right? The general
That's
public.
right.
They're the ones that
Moms and
don't
pops.
know, right? But
That's
but the
right.
smart money, he said, look, don't look at the price of gold right now. Don't look at the availability of gold at a retail level for a 1 ounce coin or whatever. He was saying, look, he says, watch the Swiss refiners and look at how
Yeah.
that they're already oversold for months and
Oh,
months and
yes.
months on
Output
not able to keep
contracts.
up, because
That's
they're the
right.
ones that are supplying the gold for the elite families, for the sovereign banks, and that's where it's happening. So you think that, and getting into the nuts and bolts of what this looks like for the average American, right? I'm going to segue a little bit here because I know that, like, it's so funny because you come on the show and you're just like, you're like the neighbor next door, like that. You're so you're relaxed. I love how you always your polos. You're at the beach behind you, but most people don't know that you're actually involved in a lot of very large international businesses, which you've already alluded to.
Yeah.
This, I'm not kind of exposing anything here, but you understand global economics and finance
Yeah.
and these things, not just through theory and through studying it, but because you're actually involved in the companies doing
That's
these
my day
things.
job. Yeah.
Yes. So like for the average American right now that is struggling, that has a couple $100,000 mortgage at 8% and is just living paycheck to paycheck and is seeing the
Yeah.
dollar worth less and less, and seeing a dozen eggs is now 10, 11, $12 a dozen, and seeing this change. What does this look like? I mean, how does, like, if Trump does say revalue gold, and you're right in terms of, okay, what is the value of gold? Well, if you look at the paper market alone out of the LBMA, let's say it's 100 paper ounces per one ounce.
Sure.
Well,
Why
even
not?
that, I mean, right now gold's at
That's right.
$3,000 an ounce, so 3,000 times 100. I mean, you're looking at
30,000.
right that you're looking at
That's right.
a lot of value. So, how does this shift change
Yeah.
the economy, especially here in America?
I reading through what it is Mr. Trump did in his first term and what it is that he's doing now, there are elements of criminal law that he's interplayed into all of this. My sense is that there are going to be some giant set-offs. So the idea is that all debts must be repaid. That's the general philosophy in the international financial world. One way or another, they get repaid. If you go into bankruptcy, fine, we're taking your stuff. One way or another, they all get repaid. What that doesn't take into account is criminality, because sovereign states reserve the right to confiscate things where criminal conduct has unfolded or been the predicate to the offense. And herein lies the issue with the first two executive orders Mr. Trump signed in his first term. And that is anything having to do with sex trafficking, children trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering associated there too, gives the United States the right to go and seize those assets. And so if you have these liabilities of the United States of America to, for example, the Federal Reserve, who loaned us a bunch of money to be printed out of thin air, and they were involved in criminality, isn't it possible or even likely that any debt due to them would be offset against their criminal culpability? And the answer to that question is yes. And it's not just the Federal Reserve, it goes all the way up to the Bank for International Settlements. What are we coming to learn? And by the way, the BIS, for those of you who don't know, is the top bank. It's the bank that owns all the other banks, central banks. They are the controllers and makers of money. They have been involved in criminal conduct one way or another throughout the world. In many cases, these crimes are what we call strict liability crimes. It doesn't even require malintent. It just requires you are a party to the crime. And herein lies the issue. They are all parties to the crime. And I think the best evidence of this, look it up for yourself, the banker for the Vatican Bank, they extradited that guy to the United States in Trump's first term. And they absolutely, positively initiated civil asset forfeiture abroad. Where that resulted, nobody knows for sure. But what I can tell you is they implemented the laws, then they executed on those laws, which still exist today. Guess who didn't undo those? Right? Mr. Biden could have said, nope, those executive orders are gone, but he didn't. He didn't. Why? And the answer to the question is that we've been watching a great giant show. That's what. While everybody's distracted with Biden falling up and down stairs and saying stupid stuff, in the background, a lot of things were moving, including the IMF switch from the SDR, that's a basket of currencies, to monetary gold. That was the first indicator. Holy cow, this whole thing's going equity model instead of debt model economy. And I think that's what you're going to continue to see unfold. And that $100 or 100 times difference in gold that you spoke of is probably about right. $30,000 an ounce or something to that effect. But I don't know if what the offset in liabilities will actually be, because if you lop a couple of zeros off of currencies, and I've twice lived through that in Poland, I saw that, and I saw that in Venezuela. As a currency reset, my sense is that's where this goes, because the true value of a dollar is measured against a loaf of bread. How much does it cost to buy a loaf of bread with gold? That answer hasn't changed in 100 years.
And
Right.
that's the interesting thing about this too, is that, well, I guess real quickly now, if the gold is at 3,000, wouldn't it be 300,000, right?
100 times, yeah.
Right.
100 times instead of 10 times. You're right.
But that's
exactly
also
right.
because I've also heard people ask, they'll say to an expert, well, what will the gold be worth in the future? And I've heard many people say, well, you're asking me to give you a fiat valuation of gold, which
good point.
It doesn't equate, because
valid point.
Like if a loaf, say the dollar enters hyperinflation, if a loaf of bread costs $5,000, because we saw this in Weimar Republic or areas where there's been hyperinflation. If a loaf of bread is $5,000, what's it matter if an ounce of gold is $10,000, right? You can't. It
doesn't make a bit of difference.
You can't use, and this is the point that I've heard people say, is that you can't look at it like that. You have to look at it as,
it's true,
like, what does an ounce of gold buy? And there's a famous story of, I think it was a bellhop out in San Francisco during the Great Depression that worked at a small hotel, and I think it was in San Francisco. And one day, one of the wealthy kind of people that were staying at the hotel gave him a gold coin as a tip, right? Gave him a 1 ounce gold coin. And the story is that after the crash, that guy went back and used that gold coin to buy the hotel. And it was the story of how these things change. I've also heard stories, I think whether it was, I'm not sure if it was Venezuela or Argentina, when their currency had collapsed, that an ounce of silver would feed a family for a month.
Yeah.
You couldn't buy a chicken for less than a wheelbarrow of cash, yet an ounce of
Yes.
silver would get enough food to pay for an entire month worth
That's
of food
right.
for a family.
That goes back to your original supposition, which is that gold is universally valuable and has been so for thousands of years, and to a lesser extent, silver. You're absolutely positively correct. A client of mine who I just adore has thrice escaped communism, literally run from Eastern Germany, amongst other places. And his advice to me, is sage advice. He said, always keep enough gold to bribe the border guards, because
To
that's
buy
what
what?
he had to do to bribe the border guards.
Oh,
Meaning, when you're
interesting.
escaping communism, you got to have enough gold in your pocket to bribe the border guards, because they want gold. They don't want the fiat currency. So how do we perceive value? And one of the things I love about cash and gold, because they share it, is universally valuable, it's portable, and it's anonymous. The three top most important things to any currency. And that's the beauty. We cannot be enslaved with central bank digital currency so long as there is a gold supply. People will always find a way. So I see freedom. I don't see any way to contain humanity. They can continue to try and kill us off. But Mr. Trump already said no central bank digital currency, which is different, by the way, from digital currencies generally, right? Whether that's Bitcoin or XRP or any other ones. All the litigation in the SEC has stopped against those companies. Why? Because they are competition, and competition is good. That's why. If you're in a free market economy, a global free market economy, what you seek are alternatives, a medium of exchange mutually agreeable to two trading partners. Right now, that happens to be gold. It's kind of a pain in the rear to fly it back and forth across the Atlantic. But if everybody agrees that XRP is the means by which they can effectuate this trade using that medium, then so be it. Others may prefer a different thing. One way or another, the WEF, the owner's model of a global control paradigm, is over. It cannot be repaired. It's too far gone. It's been destroyed. The veil is lifted. People are finally waking up to the reality of today. And I don't see anything other than a bright future if we can just stay healthy and not get poisoned. If we can stop the poisoning, whether by shots or chemtrails or otherwise. 5G, they're cooking us right now. If we stop those things, humanity has a bright future, because we're taking our damn planet back.
Yeah, interesting. And it's funny because I always keep this is a little 10-ounce bar of silver, which I always
Beautiful.
have, which I love a 10-ounce bar because you can feel the weight, even though it's just this
Feel it.
tiny little
Yeah,
thing. But it's just this reminder of like, this is real value. Like, this is
that's
real.
right.
This is money, right? Like
That's
the
right.
$100 bills, it's monopoly money. The thing is, no one knows I own this. Well, now they do because I'm broadcasting it. But I can bury this in my backyard under a tree. I can hide it
That's
anywhere.
fabulous.
Like, no one knows. I can trade it to you for, um, you
How
know,
about this? I will trade you $1 Bahamian for that. Would that be a good trade?
exactly,
Right. This makes your point. Right. Which one do you want? The metal, or you want this paper? Right.
exactly. S-
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful
and
stuff.
also, you mentioned the BIS, and wasn't it 2019 that they reclassified gold as a tier one asset?
Yes, it did. Exactly. Let us not forget that the World Bank and IMF are effectively subsidiaries of the Bank for International Settlements. So when the IMF goes to monetary gold, that's because the BIS mandated it.
Interesting. So, I mean, there's so much to kind of keep digging into with this. I'm just looking at this piece of silver
It never
here,
ends.
which is
It never ends. And by the way, the other part, going to the tier one capital requirements, is Basel III accords were supposed to have been implemented everywhere. They can't. They can't, because none of the systemic banks are solvent. Going back to 2008, for example, was it a housing crisis? No, it actually wasn't. It was a change in accounting principles. International financial reporting standards said you got to mark to market these assets that are not readily tradable. So if you've got some stagnant derivatives sitting on your balance sheet, now you got to reflect its true value, not this made up value. And that crashed AIG, who was the biggest insurance company in the world, AAA rated, who didn't have the capital to back up all of their guarantees. And then all the other banks fell right behind it. That's what gave rise to TARP. That was the bailout. They changed the law not very long ago, some years ago, to bail-ins. It basically said if you as a bank don't have the ability to repay your depositors, well, you can just give them stock. You keep their money, you give them stock, something for something. No market for it. Those are bail-ins. Either way, no matter how you describe it, that system is over. And what we see coming now, it looks to be a very elegant solution. And that elegant solution is predicated upon the use of gold as an international, universally valuable standard that even the IMF, the Bank for International Settlements, says it is so. And we can all trade with that. But it'd be interesting to see where this unfolds. No matter how you slice this, the old paradigm is over.
Numbers don't lie. The impact that Balance of Nature makes every single day is astounding. You can see the numbers for yourself at their website, balanceofnature.com. So listen to these stats concerning Balance of Nature's worldwide success. More than 1,000 success stories are reported each month. Hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide, millions of orders delivered each year, and billions, yes, billions of fruits and veggie supplements consumed by people who've decided to start living better. There's only one number missing. That's you. Do what I did and add yourself to these numbers. Start taking Balance of Nature's whole food supplements, like so many others around the world. Here's another number that should get your attention, 35%. Use my discount code SETH to get 35% off, plus free shipping and their money-back guarantee. You must use my discount code SETH. So call them at 800-2468-751 and use the discount code SETH, or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code SETH to get 35% off plus free shipping. And so how do you make sense of, I want to get your thoughts on this because you're someone who's optimistic, yet you don't wear rosy-colored lenses. You're very much so a realist. And so one thing that I am concerned of is, or as I'm watching, is a lot of this push for AI. And as much as I love what, say,
Yeah.
Musk is doing with Doge and everything, if all this is turning into is replacing people with robots and replacing functions with AI and
Yeah.
replacing souls with code, that does concern me. And I have to say, like, I
Rightfully
like
so.
a lot of what I've seen Musk do, but I also know that I would say that he would fall in the category of transhumanists, and he's, as much as you might say that, well, he's trying to beat the
Deeply
bad guys
concerning.
to it, right? He's still putting chips in people's brains. And I saw an article recently about how someone was talking about how these chips can be remotely controlled.
Yeah.
Then there's also something, this is also interesting. I'm not
Always
sure
been that way.
if you saw this, but there was one of the digital currencies, I forget which one it was. It wasn't crypto, but it was one of them that someone in China had dumped, I think it was around $1.5 million. I think it was Ethereum, $1.5 million worth of this cryptocurrency into a void wallet, which, as I understand it, what it means is that it's the equivalent of taking a pile of $1.5 million cash and lighting it on fire. And
Wow.
what they did though is that they attached these notes to it in Chinese. And so basically by moving it into a void wallet, it basically zeroes it out. So everyone who's watching the movement of these wallets and this cryptocurrency, they all saw it. And there's all this buzz going on around the
I heard
internet about
something
it.
about that. Yeah.
But what these notes in Chinese said is they said that they basically painted the picture of this person was working for some really advanced tech AI company in China. And what these notes indicated is that this company already has chips inside of all their employees that they're
Yeah.
controlling, and that
Of
these
course they do.
employees are able to be remotely controlled, and that they're also doing it in the Chinese military. And so it seemed
Of
like what they were
course.
trying to do is they're trying to dump this in there to reveal that basically that they've been using this technology to create,
Well,
like, literally remote control humans.
but I mean, we've been talking about this for 5 years. What do you think the shots were about? What do you think those nanobots were for? We have all the science. We deposited it into the federal court record. We've been saying this literally for 4 or 5 years. All they're doing is saying they're validating it. We have all the science. We knew that this was what was happening. And they admitted it in their own offering memorandum in the case of Moderna. Self-assembling, semi-intelligent, autonomous lipid nanoparticles. They're nanobots. That has been the case. It always was the case. They're just letting everybody in on the secret. So that I kind of laugh when I see Elon Musk talking about, well, we got to put some wires in people's heads. He knows damn well that's nonsense. I mean, this is robust science now. Look it up for yourself. Wireless body area network. How are they accessing it? And this is part of what we had in our lawsuit is the reason they put cesium-137 into the shots and they've polluted our skies with it. They've chemtrailed us with it is because it makes our bodies effectively into power supplies, transducers, transmitters, receivers, etc. And when you combine it with the nanobots, the nanoparticles in the shots, you have become a synbio person. In the case of the United Kingdom and Germany, they call it human augmentation. Lots of papers on that. In the case of the United States of America, there is a synbio, stands for Synthetic Biology Department in Health and Human Services, who now publishes, by the way, the One Health Initiative, whereby we're looked at no different as humans from animals, right? So when you see these new diseases and pathogens coming out, they call them zoonotic. What that means is they work on humans and people at the same time. You now have, under the One Health Initiative, you got veterinarians that enjoy the same abilities legally as does a medical doctor. Why? Because we are livestock in their eyes. And the mission of the Synbio Division of Health and Human Services is to genetically modify every plant and animal species on the planet. Why? Because our bodies, whether it's a dog or whether it's you or me, are batteries, power supplies, and cloud computing nodes. Don't believe me? Look it up for yourself. dev.inpersona.com, INPERSONA.com. And what you find is that this has been commercialized. The Bill Gates patent, it's a World Intellectual Property Office, WIPO as they call it, 20200606606 is the Bill Gates patent. It says I'm going to reserve unto myself the right to harness people as batteries, power supplies, and cloud computing nodes so I can mine cryptocurrency. dev.inpersona.com. They have already mined 1.4 trillion heartbeats. They've already used 1.4 trillion heartbeats to mine cryptocurrency. In other words, Bill Gates' patent has been commercialized, and you're looking at it right now. How many people got a Fitbit or an iPhone that's reading their biorhythms? Those biorhythms are being used to mine cryptocurrency. You are a power source. You are a cloud computing node. This is the evidence that we were putting into the federal record. Nobody wanted to hear it, but it's here and it's commercial.
And so do you think this agenda stops with this reset?
No.
This is the one thing is that
No.
because even now you've got RFK Jr. Out talking about the measles vaccine, the MMR, I think it was, where he's been on record before that talking about how the same vaccine causes autism. And I'm having a hard, so as much as I love hearing about what's happening with gold and ending this debt slavery system, that's amazing, absolutely. But then on the flip side, when I see how Elon Musk is central to so many of these massive changes in our government, and he whether he's doing good things or not, the reality is he is someone that is pushing the transhumanist agenda to the nth degree. But then even RFK Jr., who I still have a lot of hope for coming out and saying that, measles, MMR, I mean, I think I'm in some sort of like nightmarish Groundhog Day. It's like, why is this still happening? And so how do you make sense of all this yet still think that there's a future that we can achieve?
I've had a conversation with Bobby Kennedy. He knows full well. And you look at the legal work his law firm does, Children's Health Defense. He knows those lawyers are bright and they're really good, and they have prevailed in a lot of these cases. Including representing whistleblowers from the CDC who said absolutely shots are what caused autism. There's a direct correlation. He knows, and so I struggle to understand that myself. What I can tell you is that so much has been invested, billions and billions, if not $1 trillion, in this fourth industrial revolution, turning you and me and every living thing on this planet into a power source, to a battery, into cloud computing nodes, that the new currency is digits, it's data. So much of that has already happened that it cannot be undone. It's like, once you recognize that we are all a system of frequencies and vibration, just what Tesla said many years ago, more than 100 years ago, he was right. Everything is frequencies and energy. And now that these guys have figured out what that is and how to manipulate it, there is no going back. Mr. Trump even says, 6G is around the corner. Well, 5G is a 300 megahertz to 300 gigahertz band of frequencies. Terahertz is the next band up. That's what they're calling 6G. That's light frequencies, right? And that's actually already in play. It's already being used. For instance, when you see the lasers can recreate in the sky 3D images, you barely tell what the difference is between what's real and what's not real. Holograms, amongst other things. That's a function of that range of frequencies, and they're completely manipulatable. And now that man has figured out how to manipulate frequencies down to our genetics, so is the testimony of our expert witnesses in our case. That these gangsters, these scientific criminal geniuses have figured out how to manipulate our bodies remotely. Dr. Lee Vliet says that every malady known to mankind can be caused by these frequency ranges. So what's the difference? What's the distinction? And the reality is that knowledge is already out there. It's not reconcilable. So what I see happening is humanity being given a choice. And the choice is you remain God's creation and human, or you move over here and you become Elon Musk's creation or whoever else is behind it. And you are, in fact, a slave, because that's what the law says. The case is molecular pathology versus marriage genetics, 2013 US Supreme Court case. Says if they use mRNA for genetic modification, the synthetic product thereof belongs to patent holders. In other words, everybody that got the Moderna or Pfizer shots is now a vaccine slave. They're not human. They're a new species. But nobody gave them the choice, right? That's the distinction. Is it undoable? I think it is undoable. But people are going to be given that choice. Do you want to have your phone in your noggin? Do you want to be able to go from here to there in an instant? Yeah, well, that's the 6G range and all the rest of stuff that goes with it. If you want to be a human and die a natural death and live under God's rules and God's creation, then you go ahead and do that too. I don't think there's any other way, because the one thing we still have, Seth, is freedom of choice, free will. It's a gift from God, and we have to exercise it. And that's what we did when we said, no, we're not doing your damn shots. We're not doing your cryptocurrency central bank crap. We're not going along with the program. That is the exercise of our free will, God's gift to us. And I think there's a whole lot of us that will continue that.
I certainly believe so. I know I'm in that group. I know you are. And
me too. Yeah.
I'd say that the folks who are watching the show are in the exact same place as well. So kind of just, recapping as we're concluding here, you are seeing a massive monetary reset happening, the overall financial system. The people that are holding gold and silver will be the ones, I think, in my opinion, that they're the ones that will be safe. Like that's how I look at it. I look at it as this is it's an insurance policy that when that reset happens, that even, I think honestly, people say, oh, it's just too expensive and gold. Well, even if you have a gram of gold, right? A gram of gold might be enough to pay off your house. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, I don't know exactly, but it's like when you're looking at the collapse of all the other debts and you're looking at the rebirth of this new currency. It's again, going back into the country I mentioned earlier, where an ounce of silver would feed a family for a month. Like that's really, that's what it is.
That's
also
happened.
in America, look how few households actually own precious metals, right?
It's
so
true.
If someone's got 20 ounces of silver, they're already in the top 2% of precious metals owners in America.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
It's true.
It is.
So yeah, I see it the exact same way you did, but the only proviso I would add to that is that just because you happen to have these resources, let's assume that you're a bankster and you got a bunch of gold in your basement or in your bank, whatever, that doesn't mean they are safe. Because if there's criminal conduct associated with that, it is forfeitable. The government has the power. They need only allege probable cause. They don't even have to prove their case, and they'll take it. And that's already been happening behind the scenes. And the reason I know that is because that's what I used to do when I worked in the federal government during law school. Right? It's unfolding now. So if you've done bad things, don't think that gold is going to save your backside. It may or may not. That's all. My only proviso to what you said.
No, it's an important point. So we covered that, and the other half of it is just stay away from the transhumanist agenda. Get off of grid. Don't be the next person in line to get the brain chip. It's pretty simple.
I mean, a lot of people have already had it. So if you got the shots, you got to undo that. And there are now modalities and methodologies to do that. We've done a lot on CloutHub, which is where we published a lot of the stuff. Notable experts on there will tell you how to rid your body of these things. including this. To be frank, it repairs and rewrites DNA, and we've had vax injured people take it and get better. They're part of a clinical study. So people are coming up with remedies how to undo what has been done, and I certainly encourage that, because everybody deserves a right to make that choice for themselves. Are you going to be somebody's slave or not, is what it boils down to. Thank you, by the way, Seth. That's fantastic. And Liberty Club is our new Cloud Hub 2.0 coming up. I'm really excited about that.
What's the URL for that?
It's libertyclub.net. And it's a leapfrog in technology. There you go. That's it. Including a marketplace on there. Anything and everything you want in social media is in one place. It's free, of course, and it's uncensored, of course, and available in every spoken language. So if you want to read all of that in any language, you can. If you want to text with your friends, they can text in Portuguese. You'll get it in English. You send English, they'll get it in Portuguese, for example. Because this fight, Seth, that you have been a leader in, has been about humanity. It's global necessarily. And that was always our mission, to make sure that humanity was given the information so that they could make the right choice for themselves. And it is by the grace of God and by that quotient that we exist today. So thank you to you and everybody else like you that's been spreading the word, giving people the information to make a choice, to make a reasonable and rational choice.
Well, it's the guests like you that come on that give me the information.
It's always an honor.
So,
yeah, man.
Todd, it's always a pleasure and an honor. Thank you again for giving me your time. I know that you're a busy man, and I always appreciate you making time for me.
Yeah, brother.
We'll keep doing these interviews, and I think we'll be watching, hopefully, from the front row seat, the collapse of the old world order. Like that's my hope.
Yeah, and by the way, I think it's less of a collapse and more of a transition to something much newer, different. It's going from debt model to an equity model economy. And the end result, I think, is going to be fabulous. We're taking our planet back, brother.
There we go. Well, Todd, thank you so much. It's always great.
My honor,
Take
man.
care.
God bless you.
You too. With the stock market at record highs, are you confident your portfolio can weather the next big downturn? Market corrections are quick and unforgiving, wiping out hard-earned gains in an instant. Smart investors know the key to financial security is diversification. That's why Noble Gold Investments makes it easy for Americans to hedge market volatility and protect their wealth with gold. Since 2010, central banks have steadily increased their gold reserves, and in 2024, gold prices soared over 25%. Gold is simple. You buy it, you own it, you control it. With over $2 billion in precious metals sales, Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands of investors diversify their portfolios with gold IRAs and physical gold. And now, when you open a qualified account, Noble Gold will gift you 2 5-ounce silver America the Beautiful coins as a thank you. So folks, don't wait for the next downturn to catch you off guard. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 today and see how easy it is to incorporate gold into your investment strategies. So again, that's goldwithseth.com or 626-654-1906.